So let's talk Murakami. I'm not going to put links to Murakami books in the description down below because I don't want people to buy Murakami books. If you're going to read them, go to your local library or something, or go to a second-hand shop. I'll put maybe links to some other books I like in the description down below to bookshop.org, where you can pick up books, and some of the money when you buy them on bookshop.org gets sent to local and independent booksellers, or like I said, go to your local library. It benefits the library even if you take out a Murakami book. But I want to kind of talk about why I don't like Murakami. I've made videos before hating on Murakami, and with him recently losing out to Kang, which is fantastic to see, I'm inevitably going to make a video on Kang books, but I've only read 2. I've got videos featuring them, so there's one about The Vegetarian, and there's one whole video about Human Acts, which popped off after she won the Nobel Prize. So, really content creator brain, I should have made that video right away, but I need to read at least one more of her books to be like, I've read 3 Kang books, why you should read them. But anyway, I digress. Let's talk back to why we don't like Murakami. So, I want to preface this by saying he is obviously a good writer. There's a reason he wins awards. People like his writing. At the very least, he is good enough for a large swathe of people to enjoy his writing. So, I can't take away the fact that he is a talented writer. It's just, for me personally, and seemingly many people, don't like his writing. And again, let me preface that when I was about 18, 19, I read Murakami. I read at least 4 or 5 Murakami books, maybe 4, closer to 4. And I enjoyed them. I liked them because I was kind of the age where his characters were that age. And, you know, when you're like a teenager, you go through this weird, like, I know what I'm doing, these weird hormonal things, and then you're like, okay, I can align with these characters, but now that I'm a good 10 years on from that, it's like those characters haven't changed in his books. Maybe the characters are also older than teenagers sometimes, but they've still not changed from the way they were when I was reading some of his earlier books when I was like 19. So, and this includes his newer books like Killing Commandante. That's probably said wrong, but let's get into it. That's one of the points, that across his works, I don't feel like, especially the protagonists, change very much. I feel like I could pull a protagonist from one of his earlier books and pop it into his newer books, and it's basically the same guy. And I just want to read different protagonists. I read most of his books to make this video, which please go and watch because it did underwhelmingly, and I need it to do better. But yeah, so I made this video after reading a bunch of his books, and to be honest, I was rather disappointed. Like, I read like 9 of his books in a month just to make that video, and I was kind of disappointed when in the end I was like, oh, maybe the stories are slightly different, but the protagonists are basically the same throughout. Obviously, there was the 4 books in the Rat trilogy, which obviously it's the same protagonist, but then there's the other books and it still feels the same. The only different one is this one, where it is like a shorter story. I'm going to put it on the screen. That's slightly different because I think it's a female protagonist as well, so it's like, oh, okay, that's different, and it's shorter, but still there are other issues that arise in it, which we will go into. But yeah, for me, gripe number 1, protagonists are basically the same throughout, and it's a little bit underwhelming for me. Secondly, the plots again are also pretty similar. Like, obviously his work is like reeling in the fantastical, the dreamlike, and the surreal into real life. And he does that to various degrees throughout the books. The ones that I prefer are the ones where they avoid that, thinking like Colorless, even though that also has problems as well. Norwegian Wood was one of my favorite books when I was a teenager, but that still has that kind of surreal, dreamish thing, and it has many of the other problems that we will, like the third big problem that we'll get into. And so I feel like he does about the same thing in all of his books, and I get it, some authors just do that. You know, if I'm talking to a fantasy author, they're basically going to do that throughout. But he's not a genre author, he's a literary fiction author, and I would like some, little bit of variation there. But also, it's just the plots and the outcomes of the plots are same-ish. Again, in my opinion, this is my opinion, where he's got mostly this like male protagonist who kind of acts like he's 19 all his life, regardless of his age. With some exceptions, like maybe the ones a little bit more autobiographical, maybe less so. Or also the female protagonists. So, and then he meets a woman, and then he kind of gets drawn into, or sometimes it's a girl, which is even worse. He gets drawn into like the surreal or like this fantastical other world, and then he either has to rescue the woman or she like pulls him out of it. But regardless, like it kind of feels like it's her fault, which is weird every time. So maybe that's something also to address. So yeah, it just doesn't feel great reading this very similar plot over and over again with different licks of paint. Like IQ 84, God, that was 3 books that I just powered through in a week, and in the end I was like, what? Huh? This was it kind of sometimes feels underwhelming. He builds these big surreal worlds, and then it's just kind of that underwhelming same ending for a lot of the books. In this case, not all of them. I think it's less so than like the protagonists that feel the same in all of them. But like the plot and the steps in the plot feel very same-ish, but maybe in fewer of the books. But yeah, that's another gripe I have. And thirdly, and I think this is the biggest issue, which is genuinely a big... Like the other two are like subjective. They're very much like, you can take him or leave him, that's fine. Apart from like the stuff with like the women being bad. That's like fine, like people just might not like that. Thirdly, and the big one I think, is just the way he writes women, especially like girls, young girls. So like I said earlier, it feels like in most of his books, unless there is a female protagonist, that the women are just kind of like in the wrong. It's like the woman's fault always, and that just doesn't sit right for me. Then like, we'll go in order. Then he like always over-sexualizes them, and I get it, you know, he's a grown-up, we're all grown-ups, apart from when I was like 17 reading this book, I wasn't a grown-up. You know, we're grown-ups, we can talk about like sex and stuff, but it's like, it's every book, man. It's like all the time, it's like, yeah, man. And then here's this really graphic description of the sex they're having and how somehow like the sex leads to their spiritual awakening and enlightenment, which can be done well. Like, obviously, the act of sex can be like an enlightening experience, but every single book, like, I find a different way to do that. And it's just a little bit repetitive with like always needing to have the sex, and sometimes it's like pretty violent the way he describes it, and sometimes it being violent doesn't really like mean much to the plot. Like in Colorless, it kind of means something because it relates to how he's being treated by the other characters, but then in some of the other books it's like, oh, I don't think you needed to put this much of like violence in the intercourse there, buddy. It just doesn't feel like it needs to be there. And then the next step with that is the way he talks about young girls, and I don't know if it's a cultural thing, so I don't know. I'm not making the excuse for it, but is it a cultural thing? But I don't think it. I don't think it is, because saying it's a cultural thing would mean all Japanese people are like this, and that feels racist. I just don't think that's true. The way he talks about young girls sometimes is very, very creepy, and I get it. Again, I was a teenager, you go through those points, you have those hormones and stuff, but like, you're a grown man, brother. Like, when you're reading like Dance, 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 and the way the protagonist is talking about the young girl, he's the daughter of the woman he's seeing. I can't remember if he's seeing her, but no, he's not seeing her, but the daughter of this woman that he helps. I'm like, you're saying you would date her? And I'm like, what? Like, this is stuff you don't say to a child. There's Norwegian Woods. I'm pretty sure it is Norwegian Woods with, like, again, young teen girl, like, strips in front of her father's, like, funerary thing. And it's like, huh? Why? It's... And even IQ 84... I don't care about spoilers. He like does it with a teenager. I think she's 15, and and like it's like played off as like, oh, he has to do it to stop the evil gnomes. I'm like, are you sure about that? Are you sure that was the only way we could do this, Murakami? Was there no other way you could have like done that? Like, did we have to do this? Did that have to be the case? And it just feels creepy. And sometimes even when he's even doesn't have to be having intercourse with them. It's like the way he talks about them. And then don't get me started on Kafka on the Shore, and it's like a little boy and his mum and the incest there, and I'm like, brother, please, like I'm just gonna. No, and it's. So yeah, I feel like that was a little bit scattershot, but I just wanted to just like get in front of the camera and talk about it, and like and look, like there are other books that are very good, and also, you know, they talk about sex and like intercourse and stuff, and that's fine. Like it can be done fine. Like I'm not a prude about it, but it's just when it's like teenagers or like kids, like, brother, stop. When it's like unnecessarily violent, and I even don't think it like using it as a plot device is good either. Like there's better ways of going about it. I have the same problem with Bollywood, where like the entire time is like the main character motivation is let's fridge this woman, let's like abuse this woman, and they'll give the character motivation. I'm like, brother, you can find a better way of doing that. So it's just, again, I feel like it's not necessary, especially like the violent aspect of it. Like, we don't want to come across as prudish, but I just feel like you don't necessarily need to use sex as a way to motivate your stories unless it's like pivotal to the plot. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Murakami and why we don't like him. Congrats to Kang again. I'm glad you won the Nobel Prize over Murakami. I will try and read one of Kang's newer books, but there are other books I want to read as well. It's the end of the year, and I'm trying to hit a certain milestone so I can get a really great title for a video. But let me know your thoughts on Murakami in the comments down below. Do you love him? Do you hate him? Do you agree with my points? Am I talking out my ass? And again, I do want to say maybe this is like just a thing that's lost in translation. I'm reading these all in English. Maybe in the Japanese this comes across completely differently, but I feel like that's not necessarily true. But if you have read them in the original Japanese, let me know if maybe they come across slightly differently. Thank you for watching, and I hope you read a great book today. Coffee. This is cold now, but I wanted to keep it as a prop, and I didn't really use it as a prop, to be honest.